In the meantime, that we wait for a few other people to join, I will briefly introduce also our today's topic. So, as you all know, transparency markers to the final consumer are a sort of like old experiment, but from the lab that is now in the moment and where they are turned into best practices, and the denim industry is moving forward is moving fast towards this direction. So this will be the topic around which we will have a conversation today. And how we have here together with us very special guests with daily practical examples, and they will share also their experience within innovation and supply chain development. And also we will share also some brands resilience experience. So yeah, welcome first of all to Walden Lam, the CEO and co-founder of Unspun. So welcome, Walden.
Thank you. You want me to introduce?
No problem. You will
Okay.
have a chance later on.
Cool.
Just want to briefly introduce Unspun, which is your company. For those of you that doesn't know it, Unspun is a textile innovation studio and also a custom denim label. They develop and apply innovative hardware and software towards like the apparel production to make it smarter. And they also connect robotics for physical manufacturing, and on the other side, software for digital automation, and also the custom fit denim brand that they built. Then we have also with us today Jordan Nodarse from Bossa, and he's a textile and design consultant. So welcome, Jordan. Bossa is one of the largest and integrated textile corporation from Turkey, and they focus on high quality denim fabrics, and also they have a huge capacity for dyeing and finishing the denim production. Then we have also with us today Oudard, which is she's like a denim consultant, and she's expert in designing and developing jeans for different European labels. Welcome, Anne. Then we have also as a speaker Annie Wells. She's the director and founder at Simply Suzette, and also a consultant at Triarchy. Triarchy is one of the brands that has also recently launched their impact label with Renoon. And Simply Suzette is a storytelling platform that supports sustainable innovation and help brands and manufacturers use their businesses as a positive force, building inclusive supply chains, and also helping consumers navigating the world of sustainability in fashion. And then last but not least, welcome also Iris, our Renoon CEO and co-founder.
Hi, everyone.
Cool. So I think we are ready to go into our discussion today. So I don't want to take other time. And yeah, so let me change my slide. So starting from transparency and traceability for denim, as you know, today we are focusing on the importance and the challenges of transparency. At Renoon, the definition that we use to take reference from is the one that Kering as standardized. And like to briefly explain the difference between transparency and traceability, we can say that transparency is what regards what refers to brands providing relevant information and like mapping a supply chain and suppliers information, while on the opposite side, traceability is more related to the ability of build up evidence, so tracing back the story of the product with the requirements of different traceability tools, which are, for example, the chain of custody documentation, or also different digital platforms that use different traceability data protocols, like, for example, tracer technologies to permit audits. So these are like the difference. This is the difference between transparency and traceability. And on this, Jordan, I would like to start the conversation with you and to go deeper into this topic with you, because as we know, most brands that, for example, talk to us, or also in general, mention that the main thing that scares them when approaching transparency is the collaboration aspects with their supply chain, because maybe they're not sure that their suppliers will be willing to share information on what's behind. And so sometimes they seem also scared about that. So what's your perspective on this?
It's difficult for, I think, all vendors across the supply chain to not feel a little worrisome about who's looking inside. What are they going to find? Especially most of the time when people are looking for something, they generally will find whatever they're looking for. It's always kind of reminds me of a lawsuit in certain ways. When you look at lawyers and trying to win a battle of proving something, but that's really just how the world works, because we work on a legal system of laws. And really, is all transparency is trying to do is just trying to say, hey, we're doing the work right, and we want to show you that we're doing it right. Because a lot of the times when people are hiding things, that's why they don't want to show that, how everything's being done. A lot of times people say it's trade secrets that they're trying to hide. Yes, of course, there might be some particular trade secrets, but the majority of things like that, for instance, Renoon is trying to show, is for the consumers to really understand what goes into making this, where's it coming from. And the mapping is really the most important thing, because you can actually see most realistically with common sense where it is all coming from, and if that seems efficient. Sometimes people, after using a transparency tool, they'll see that they're buying trims from China, shipping it to Europe, and then producing something there to then ship it to America, to then distribute it there, then back to Europe sometimes even. And it's kind of crazy, this mapping of inefficiencies. And so even if at that point in time, you might even have a transparency tool helping you become more efficient, a transparency tool that's actually helping you become more sustainable, not the other way around, where you think that it might be detrimental by finding something. Because the first thing to fixing a problem is identifying the problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting also, you mentioned like the supplier mapping versus like the supplier tracing, because we know that supply chain mapping is like the possibility to discover like indirect suppliers, also understanding where, as you said, the product come from, while on the other side, supply chain traceability goes deeper, on a deeper level. And also on this, I've recently seen an article from WSJ, which was like explaining that in the US, for example, it's still really complicating tracing back where the cotton came from, because as you all probably know, US banned the use of cotton from Xinjiang for the reasons we might all know, due to labor, etc. And we are still talking about this topic since already since a few years, and there are still controversies about the cotton traceability. So Jordan, considering your practical experience at Bossa also, what do you think about it from the perspective of efficiency and effectiveness of like supply chain and traceability in general? Is this something that you find that is really possible? Do you find it feasible?
I find it very feasible. Back in the day, selling your own product online was crazy. You used to have to sell to wholesalers because they had stores, and you'd have to sell them. And to create your own online store and not have an actual store to sell it in, you're never gonna be a company that exists. And nowadays we have multi-billion-dollar businesses that have built that model. So everything in the beginning seems a little crazy. And the interesting part about this is you have to imagine connecting to your supply chain seems difficult now, but it's going to become a lot better. And technology is actually really leading this path, because once you start, putting the information of your supply chain together in one place, once again, it becomes more clairvoyant to see how it is, where it is, how's it connecting together, and you build this bond with your supply chain. That's something that you maybe didn't have before. How often are you going to your fabric mills to say, where's my cotton coming from? Are they able to answer that question? Some fabric mills will go, I don't know where your specific cotton was coming from. You work with mills that are more intimate with their supply chain, then most likely those are the mills that are going to be more expressive to sustainable initiatives, to certifications, to having a connection directly to farmers, not just traders. Because cotton is definitely a commodity that has been built by slavery over many, many years, and it still continues to this day to have those deep roots in it, by people suppressing farmers and suppressing pricing, and ultimately a lot of middlemen are unnecessary. So if anything, the way I see this is that these transparency tools are going to start canceling out a lot of these middlemen and start creating more of a direct to brand partnership with farmers, and knowing exactly where your cotton is coming from, and sponsoring cotton projects. And a lot of this is happening right now, especially with regenerative cotton.
Yeah, thank you. Also, like, if you have any question, feel free also to interrupt us or raise your hand, or type like your question in the chat, of course. So yeah, thank you, Jordan. And moving next to you, Annie, and talking about the role of the brand in the supplier choice. From your expertise and also from the request that you might have collected from your clients, is there an interest and what's like the status of it? So if there's an interest or not in building a supply chain that is also transparent, and also which and how big is this request of information that you receive from like your clients or from brands in general?
Yeah, I think, sorry, it was directed at me, correct? Not,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, from my experience, and I will say, we do have Adam from Triarchy, the founder of Triarchy, here too. I was lucky enough to work on one project with Adam called Celsius. And I love getting able to work with brands that have the mindset of Adam, in which they would like to actually know their supply chain and have relationships with everyone in their supply chain. But obviously there are still brands that are a little bit behind, that are now just getting started on their traceability journeys, and mostly for legal reasons, I would say. Because of the upcoming legislation that's on the rise, brands are now starting to get a little scared about what's coming. And that's been a little bit of a kick in the butt to show them that this is what's coming, and it is going to be actually necessary and mandatory for you to be able to trace back your products all the way back to the source and actually have production data for it as well. So I'd say there are obviously, I tend to say we talk to like our sustainable fashion bubble, and everyone in this bubble is already on the page that we need to be transparent and traceable, because we can't measure what we don't know, and we can't manage what we don't know. So we obviously have to be able to trace things back to make sure we're having positive impacts along the way. But there's still a large segment that is outside of this sustainable fashion bubble that we speak to. That are still lagging behind. But in terms of what data they're looking for, there are a lot of brands that are now starting to ask for farm level data to go all the way back to that cotton. And we primarily speak about cotton and denim, because denim is primarily made about cotton with cotton. But using cotton as an example, I know Anne also probably has a lot to say about cotton specifically in traceability, because we did embark on a cotton traceability study specifically in the denim industry, which started about 3 years ago now, I'd like to say, where we actually, where we started working our way down the denim supply chain, and Anne being a designer, we started kind of with where we knew best, which was the brand, retailer, and anyone in the business of making jeans, basically, understanding what their challenges and solutions were to traceability, to the farm level, then worked our way down to the spinners and weavers and mills. So anyone in the business of actually making the denim fabric. And the last step that we just work on were the traders. And maybe you want to jump in on the trader side, but we definitely do see a lot of more direct to farm programs happening, as Jordan mentioned. But we did, after the study, have feelings that cotton traders won't be eliminated completely, and there are still some positives about their roles in the supply chain and helping people, for example, have the capital to source the cotton that's needed for the upcoming season, which some mills and brands do not actually have. So yeah, I would say there is a lot of interest from brands and retailers on the data that's from the farm, but so far we've only seen the ones that really are ahead of the game in terms of sustainability ask for this level of data and transparency and traceability.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, Jordan, please.
Can I add something to that too? And one of the things I think that's really important too with technology is that making it digestible for the consumer. You know, some of this data that Annie's talking about, it can get technical. I mean, even just talking about cotton traders, you start adding one more person to be like, what do they do exactly? Well, actually, that's a hard question to ask, because what do they actually do really? But let's not get into that right now. Nonetheless, having something for the consumer to understand that they can fully be able to make a decision on their own is really important. And that needs to be, there needs to be these double faceted areas where we have, you know, highly, you know, complicated data, you know, that's making sure that things are being done correctly, that maybe a brand has either consultants or people that are specializing on this on their side. And then you have that information then being digested to the customer without it being greenwashed. So, you know, key metrics, or what you can call key points, that they're taking in.
Yeah, thank you also, Oudard, for adding this. Then also, Annie, you mentioned the report that you made also with Denim. So, Annie, what came into my mind after reading the report was like that it's super interesting what you wrote in the report. So basically, you investigated about the denim industry and going back to the cotton's origin. And on this, from a brand perspective, why is the supplier choice so important? So which are the main factors that you need to consider as a brand before committing to a supplier? What do you usually advise to brands?
Sorry, is it for me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's a combination of finding someone who's going to provide you with the best quality, the best prices, and then the best practices. And it's where you find that balance between the business side and also the environmental and social situation of your supplier. I think the way brands select supplier creates some kind of natural selection among suppliers. You know, they're gonna pick the best for different reasons, and that's gonna shape the environment, like the kind of offer that you can get from your suppliers, for the best or for the worst. And I just think brands do choose who they work with, but I feel like it shouldn't just be one way. It has to create some sort of connection, and you have to get involved and also contribute to make things better at suppliers level. And earlier you were talking about some of the fears that brands have, that they're not going to get answers, that their suppliers are not going to tell them about where things are coming from and how they were made. And I think this is a fear that you have when you don't know your suppliers, when you don't speak to them, when you don't have a relationship with them. But if you choose your suppliers well, if you work with them for a long time, then all these questions will be answered and in a very natural way. One of the things we found out when we first started our research with Annie was that the brands that had the biggest amount of answers were those who were working with maybe fewer suppliers, but had long-term relationships with them. And I think that's a really, really important way to, just a better way to deal with your business.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So like, as a recap, like it's important to have like a direct connection. And on this, it's also interesting what Annie mentioned before. So the role of traders, and in your opinion, like what would be like the next developments on this?
I think
there would be a shift or not?
I think so far, like most people in the fashion industry have no idea of who the traders are and what they do. It's always been a bit of a mysterious part of our supply chain, and getting into that with Annie was like super. It was really the most exciting part of our research so far, to be honest, because it's something we had no idea about. So what we heard back from traders was that first they didn't really know what we were doing either. And there was a huge disconnection between what they do and what we do in terms of communication. And just like for suppliers, they were like, okay, if you have questions, come and ask those questions to us. One of them told us, oh, don't go through your suppliers to get answers from us, like come and ask it directly and talk to us. And I think that's one of the most important things in traceability. It's basically people tend to work in silos within company, but also at a bigger level. And so someone from a fashion brand is not communicating with traders. And I think this is where we're missing the point. I think a trader can really be an asset if your brand is looking to invest in interesting cotton programs, because the trader is going to be able to tell you, well, I have this project in this country, they're doing great, they need investment, they need commitment, so they can buy more material, more machineries. Do you want to get involved? Should we create a partnership? And I think this is where the role of traders is really important. And I don't think it's all about skipping the traders. I think we have that idea that traders only basically are only speculating and like for money transactions, and that they're taking their slice of it, and this is all they do. But they also take care of logistic, insurance, payment, a lot of stuff that honestly brands don't want to get into, or some mills don't want to get into. So I think it's more about like creating good partnerships and ethical behaviors with traders.
Cool. Good. Thank you.
If I can add something too, in terms of traceability too, a lot of going back to relationships over transactions and actually establishing this connection with the trader. And one of the traders told us that, you know, if we get a request that's being requested by your supplier, that's requested their supplier to ask us for this information, the message gets watered down, and the genuinity of the message also just doesn't feel as genuine. The request doesn't feel genuine, and it does take time, resources to gather that information. So if you're not asked very nicely to do something that's going to take a lot of your time and resources, you're probably not likely to do it as much as you would with someone actually asking nicely.
Yes, because so far, like passing on information, like gathering data and passing it on, is usually something that they're not paid for. So they're going to do it for you if they know you, if they have a relationship with you. Otherwise, why bother?
Yeah.
And also, if you think about with brands too, it's funny because some brands, like we're talking about selecting farms and traders. Some brands don't even select fabrics. Some brands are, they're just working with a factory. They show them, a picture and they say, make me this. And that's really all they're doing. And so I think if anything right now, there's a big wake up call happening with fashion saying, you can't get away with just doing whatever. And in the end, if you don't sell it, you just put it on sale. This is what's happened is we're an industry that can continue to make mistakes and still make money. We have very, very little accountability. And so right now, it's just us waking up to really have accountability and say, all right, what is this made of? How is it made? And how are we going to go forward? And what stance are we going to put on this? Some people might be very focused on cotton. Some people might be focused on weaving. Some people might be focused on the washing. Some people might be focused purely just on social atmospheres of each condition, maybe fair trade or things like that. So it is something that I think is most important, is just defining where you want to go and then how involved you want to get and taking those first few steps, because there's a lot of steps and it can be overwhelming. So going forward into one of them is better than not going into any of them.
Yeah, exactly. It's a matter of like balancing and like making what's more efficient for you, for your company. And on this, Walden, I know that with Unspun, you go through like innovation, and you are bringing to the market different solutions to improve the supply chain efficiency. So, for example, in this slide, we see like 3 ways of improving the efficiency that might be different according to the brand and to the company. But how do you think these 3 models can also simplify traceability and like bring you to the road to transparency?
Yeah, no, I think we've gone through the very hard experience of like trying to build a denim label from scratch with on-demand production, like one piece at a time, and went through a lot of the journey that all of the panelists have mentioned. And I think that the relationship piece is one that's like, when we talk about traceability and transparency, there is so much about the data and information. Like typically that's a reaction, but really the relationship has to be there, and the investment in those relationships has to be there. And so it's just to give you an example, we went through like a B Corp certification exercise, right? And they asked us, hey, are your suppliers providing living wages to their workers? And it's a question that, it's harmless, and it's such an intuitive question. But when you try to get that information from your suppliers, there's a bit of inherent tension, if you think about it, because there's margin information. If they provide you with that information, like you might take advantage of that information and kind of like squeeze it out of it. And, in the past couple of years, you've seen a lot of that experience, with suppliers. Typically, like suppliers, CMT makers, they operate in a very thin margin, and it's not a very easy business. And so I think for us, at least on-demand production and nearshoring have allowed us to build stronger relationships, and for us to a point that has been mentioned about this self-select point. I think for us, it's the reverse side of it, because our business is so difficult. Like our quality of standard is so high. Like we have all these sustainability requirements. It's like the supply self-select to get onto our business almost. And so I think the whole kind of setup of the business model of nearshoring and on-demand production have allowed us to focus our energy on a few suppliers that really believe in sustainability, and kind of filter out the suppliers that might be just at the beginning side of the journey. For local supply chain, probably the LA scene, the Los Angeles scene is a much more vibrant ecosystem of seeing a bigger part of the process. I think at least the US, it's much harder to onboard the whole local supply chain. We're seeing kind of more nearshoring setup that's happening in Europe for Europe. But I think in the US is much harder.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So it really depends also on the market you are focusing on. Cool. So yeah, moving on. Like we know that suppliers and brands are not the only stakeholders that should be considered in this journey. And on this, I would like to ask you Iris, the next question, because there are other two main stakeholders that are like consumers and governments. So how do you envision they affect what in the denim industry is doing right now in terms of traceability, in terms of transparency?
Yeah, first of all, as Jordan was saying, the sort of shifts that currently are happening sort of in the back end, like all the questions that are coming in are starting to become part of what a brand, for example, also with what Walden was mentioning, how as a brand they're sort of self-selecting suppliers, right? So it's starting to become really an embedded part into what companies are doing. So in the way we sort of see it also as Renoon, or when we follow companies we work with, is that we've seen it over and over, sort of seeing transparency as sort of like the tip of the iceberg. And I think, Sarah, we have like some slides where we show like the different processes, right? Where you know, you go from so what we mentioned right now, like data collections, you process that data and then you communicate it. But part of the communication, it's now sort of needs to become a new embedded part in the whole exercise, right? So you start also with that and then you go backwards. And that's, of course, is demanded. It can be demanded by regulatory demands. So as also Annie was mentioning, yeah, in Europe, a lot of brands are starting to become for this because they have no clue of what's happening in the back, but sort of starting to use the front. So whatever they will have to communicate because the regulatory requirements are going to ask them to, and sort of go back. And we're seeing this as well with companies that sort of and we're more and more convinced that sort of the differentiation really that's going to happen between companies that are just going to be, you know, reacting to compliance versus companies that are going to be proactive and really build resilience in the brand and build trust as a brand towards the final market, which is the consumer. It's going to be really, really important to actually have this exercise of where communication is an important part, an important piece of where you start when you go back. And not only for brands actually, but so the final brands, so brands that sell to the final consumers, but also sort of what Unspun is doing, right, as an innovator that also has a B2B service, but also going back to, right, like Bossa and other suppliers, right? So also suppliers being able to provide that data proactively, provide and being able to communicate and sort of pass on that data from what they have to the brands and then finally to consumers. And yeah, and I think just to conclude for today, we also wanted, I also brought some of the examples of the widgets that we've embedded inside of Unspun and Triarchy specifically. So currently those can be found inside of the websites of Unspun and Triarchy, and soon on QR codes. So congrats to both brands.
Yeah, exactly. These like are two examples of like brands are bringing transparency and information to the final consumers. So, so yeah, I don't know if like are there any question that anyone want to raise. So feel free to open your microphone. I think we have a few minutes, a few free minutes for any question that may come from anybody here.
Yeah, otherwise, if, of course, everyone in the panel has anything that they want to add.
I'm curious. So when it comes to supply chain transparency and mapping your supply chain, how's it different with Unspun since you're doing more customization? Is this something that makes it easier or more difficult to map your supply chains? This
Yeah,
question,
I guess it
towards Walden.
yeah, I guess it depends on the scope. Obviously, we have fairly strong relationship with our CMT suppliers because the quality and the consistency, it has to be there for the custom part to work. I think the hardware part is further down the scope of, like, we're not in a position to be able to source large quantities of cotton and have a say in kind of how that is grown. Typically, in ordering denim fabrics, we have to scrape off kind of like a large quantities of order from other brands and pick the most kind of progressive and like low impact fabrics out of the options that we have available. We can't even run our own kind of denim fabrics runs with the mills a lot of times. But then, when it comes to washing and when it comes to like using like laser in that process, we have full control. So like the closer it is to the consumer, the more control we have. But the more upstream, it's a matter of size and influence, at least from our standpoint.
Are you doing all that in Los Angeles?
No, we actually started out in San Francisco, where they don't even want to wash our fabric. But now we do a combination of suppliers around the world, depending on where the consumers are.
I also have a question for you, Walden. Sorry. I was wondering, because now that you're doing 3D weaving, you're also making the fabric.
Yes.
Are you making it from yarn or from
Yarns.
cotton? From yarns?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're getting closer to making it from scratch.
Yeah, and then I think the kind of challenge becomes, where do you source? And there are intricate nuances along the supply chain, like for our industry, for example, like sizing is used, right? A lot of times. Where do you even source sizing solutions? Do you source them locally? Like around here, there's no sizing solution provider, for example. And so, yeah, I think the more upstream we get, the more nuanced problems that are not typically top of mind. But now we have to face those challenges.
When you talk about sizing, it's sizing the yarn before weaving it?
Yarn.
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
Okay. If you're looking for solutions, I know some people who have great solutions in Europe.
I know, exactly. It's in Europe. It's not here in the
Yeah.
US.
I see that we have also a comment in the chat from Bill Jesus. Sorry if I spell it wrong. It says, it looks amazing. As a sustainable communication specialist, I'm delighted that responsible communication is highlighted. So I believe it's more important than ever nowadays. So yeah, that's also like what we see with Renoon, is like being transparent and being like also precise with the information you communicate can help also the brands be trusted from the market.
On the topic of communication, I'll just say too, I think a lot of brands these days I've heard the term called break their branding, to completely switch to sustainability terms and just talking about all of the sustainability initiatives they have going on. But I think with, Renoon and widgets like this is a great way to still be able to have that incorporated in your brand, but still be able to build your brand and build your unique identity. That's not a sustainability identity. It's your own brand still, but utilizing tools like Renoon really helps with that in terms of communication as well.
I like that. Yeah, I always call it like a a series of doors customers want to go through. It's like people don't walk straight into your house, into your bedroom. They go through the front door into the living room, and they have other doors that they get to choose to go into. And this is the same way of accessing information for a brand. It's like you don't want to just plaster them with all this, data as soon as they come to your websites or to your stores. It's like letting them understand just some basic information is great. You don't have to be pushing it into their face at every single point of view, because if you don't, they won't believe you. Let them discover it on their own. And these platforms like Renoon, that's giving you the capability to take your data and then put it in somewhere where they can see it and understand it, gives them the chance to go through a user experience to learn on their own and access it. I don't think everyone's going to do that, but nowadays there's a lot more interest of people wanting to discover for themselves. They want to get lost in learning about how is this made. No different than the reason why we have shows literally called "This is how this is made," or "How things are made," or whatever that show's called. I think it's a National Geographic show, but yeah, I mean, the most important thing here is not hiding information and showing your proof that if you're actually doing something right, let's have others learn from it.
And that's the sustainable fashion ecosystem. Okay, I will say thank you for joining, and also thank you for sharing your experience, Walden, Jordan, Annie, and also Iris. It was a pleasure for us having you here and hearing your story and your insights from the industry. So I think this is it. We will also share some post-event contents with you via email. So you will have the recordings and all the contacts if any other interesting question came up into your mind. So you can directly ask to Walden, Jordan, Annie, and Anne, or us. So yeah, thank you everybody, and see you outside.
Bye. Thank you
everyone. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.